Welcome, everyone. We're so excited that you've joined us today. And I am honored to be able to share this time with our special guest, Dr. Alberto Villoldo, medical anthropologist and best-selling author. Dr. Villoldo has studied shamanic healing practices of the Amazon and Andes for over 30 years. He is founder of the Four Winds Society and of the Light Body School, internationally recognized as the gold standard in shamanic energy medicine education. Dr. Villoldo, thank you so much for joining us today. I've been following your work for a very long time, and so this is a real honor for me. And I also know people that have had their health completely transformed in working with you, that feel just indebted and just so much gratitude to you and your work. And so anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Beth. Great to be with you in this program.
Oh, it's so great. Well, I'm a medical doctor and I am dealing with complex illness with people. And I really have come to realize over the 25 years of medical practice that very oftentimes the nidus for disease originates from childhood trauma and kind of imprints in the energetic system of the body and then eventually translates into the physical body. And unless someone can deal with it at that level, it's hard for them to become well. And shamanic energy medicine really addresses these imprints. And can you talk about how that is true and how you see kind of energetic imprints translating in the physical body?
Yeah, sure. My pleasure, Beth. I was trained as a medical anthropologist and spent many years in the Amazon working with the medicine men and women. But before I went to the Amazon, I was at San Francisco State University directing a really small biology neuroscience laboratory where we were trying to see if we could create psychosomatic health. Because we knew we could create psychosomatic disease, but could you use the mind and the brain and the nervous system to create health? And we found that the impediment to that was trauma. And so I closed my lab and I decided to go down to the Amazon to work with the indigenous shamans that didn't have MRIs, that didn't have the sophisticated diagnostic technologies that we have. They had the power of the mind and the brain to create health. So I spent 25 years studying with them and learning a tremendous amount. Among other things, that they are biologists. Biologists that include in their definition of biology the invisible world, the energetic world. We only consider biology the material, chemical world, but they were able to perceive the energy field that surrounds the physical body and to find the origins or the stories of trauma. Because remember, trauma is not what happened to us. There are no traumatic events. There are only traumatic experiences. And they're stored in the body. The body keeps score. The body remembers. We store it energetically in our nervous system, in the vagus nerve, but we also store it in the energy field in the form in what the Chinese medical doctors call stale qi or deadly qi. And the shamans discovered how to upgrade the quality of the energy field so that you could then upgrade the quality of the body and create health. And that meant removing the imprints of trauma energetically and then helping your patient to discover the lesson that life was trying to offer them at that time in that very painful kind of situation. They had to take the gift. They had to turn it into medicine, turn the trauma into medicine. And I know that in your practice of medicine, you have met people that say, wow, my cancer saved my life because they received the medicine, the gift from their illness. So that was the shamanic approach, that They believe, in fact, and I'm convinced, that the origin of all physical conditions is emotional and energetic. And if we don't if we don't go to the source, to the why, then we're going to continue treating the what. The what do I have? What? But when we go to the emotional and energetic, we can have tremendous healing happen in a very short period of time.
I so agree with that. And so how do you address this? Like, how do you help guide people back to the why?
Well, the first thing is you need to discover what occurred, what the story is. And sometimes it's not something that happened to you. Maybe it's an early life, early childhood trauma. Maybe somebody touched you inappropriately when you were 6, or maybe it was a past life experience, or maybe it was an intergenerational trauma, something that happened to your great-grandmother. We call that today epigenetics. We know that even biblically, that the sins of our grandfathers will have to be paid for 7 generations. So frequently it's something that occurred to your great-grandmother, and that was passed down particularly from the mother's side, because, we inherit our mitochondria. Our life force comes only from our mother's line. So what the shamans did, what they do is that they're able to track an original wounding that you're carrying with you, but that you may never have had the experience directly. It's something that happened down your family line. And these in the jungle, they're called generational curses that we have to heal. And they say that when we heal them for future generations as well. But we have to find out what occurred, and not so much the event, but the story that we created around us, that the story that lives within our body, about how we're not worthy, about how we are ashamed, about how we don't deserve, or how we can't trust men, or we cannot trust life to support us. And once you find the story, you find out that it's not true. And then it can be replaced by the truth, by a true story. In fact, at that point, you can not only replace it with a better story, you can become the storyteller, the author of your own life journey, of your own destiny.
That is so beautiful. Yeah. And is it the type of thing where you're working with people repeatedly in order to shed the light on these kind of generational traumas? Or is this something that can happen all in a short period of time for people?
It happens very rapidly, but sometimes it can take months to get to that very rapid moment. But generally, it's a very rapid process. It's an epiphany, but it has to be supported by the brain nutrients, because you cannot change your mind unless you change your brain. And we have a very ancient brain, a limbic brain that we share with all the mammals, called the mammalian brain, that will only change through ceremony. It needs ceremony in order to change. And that's why you find ceremonies everywhere in the planet, in every culture and in every tradition. So that's why in shamanic societies, sorry about that. That's why in shamanic societies, you find that there are rites of passage to transit from an old self that you're leaving behind into a new self that is just being born right now. And those ceremonies are essential, because we will not be able to change our mind. We'll be able to understand the diagnosis, what's wrong and what happened, but we won't be able to change it unless we create a sacred engagement around that transition, around that journey. And I thought that we could maybe try this later on in the program.
Oh, that would be amazing for our guests. So it also seems that in the setting of a ritual, there is a buy-in, so to speak, almost like a it really deputizes our belief system. So there's this, we're creating this setting for us to kind of believe that something can clear and believe that something can change, or that we have the ability to change. Can you talk about human belief and how you're setting the stage for a positive belief around healing?
Yeah, the beliefs, the destructive, the negative beliefs are encoded in neural networks in the brain, particularly in that old mammalian brain that we share with the Neanderthals. It's a Neanderthal brain. It's archaic. It helped us survive for 1,000,000 years, but now it keeps getting us into trouble. So we have to establish higher order neural networks. We have to come up to the higher brain, to the neocortex, to the prefrontal lobes of the brain, and to a brain that cannot run on the fuel that the Neanderthal brain runs on, which are sugars. This is a brain that needs to run on fats, that needs to repair the hippocampus. When the hippocampus is damaged, this is the learning center in the brain. Then we cannot have a new experience. We can't learn something new about ourselves. We cannot entertain even a more functional belief system because this region is damaged, and we know that it's damaged by toxic chemicals, that is damaged by stress, that is damaged by cortisol, one of the stress hormones. And we used to be able to repair it with the omega-3 fatty acids, with DHA, and which we would get from fish or from mollusks. In fact, a really fascinating quantum leap in human consciousness happened around 50,000 years ago that archaeologists called the Great Leap Forward, that coincided with a period of climate change when the climate was getting hotter and more arid, and our great-great-grandparents moved from the savannas to the riverbeds, to the rivers, and to the ocean, and to the beach, and they began to eat mollusks that were rich in DHA, fish, the fatty fish. But today, all of our fish comes from farms, is farm-raised, and is raised on corn. And you cannot make DHA from corn. So today, our brains are broken. Our hippocampus is not repairing. We don't have the ability to entertain a new belief system viscerally and embodying it. It becomes only an idea that we have a very hard time buying into and subscribing to because we don't have the brain structure. So this is where the shamans, for even today in the Amazon, before you do shamanic ceremony, you have to do a dieta. And the dieta, the diet, contains a lot of the berries and a lot of the plants that will repair the hippocampus, which will repair very quickly, by the way. Hippocampus will repair in 6 weeks, and then you can have a new experience. So even today, we are living in that big disconnect between the body and the mind. And for the shamans, biology includes the mind, includes the invisible world, includes the medicinal plants that will upgrade the brain so that we can have an experience of the higher mind and not of the obsessive, compulsive, stressed out mind.
Wow, it's beautiful. And you talked a little bit about energetic epigenetics. And can you speak to that right now more?
Yeah, I was attempting to cook yesterday, and and actually my next book is a vegan cookbook, which I'm co-authoring with a world-renowned chef. But I had a kitchen knife out and I cut myself, and it was beginning to heal already. But the minute you cut yourself, there's this amazing repair process that's triggered. Immune cells go there, you have stem cells rushing to the place, you have tissue regeneration happening, and the skin grows very rapidly. But then it stops right at the level of your finger. It doesn't keep growing into this kind of mushroom. It stops. It knows where to stop. Geneticists will tell you this is in the DNA, but the shamans say, no, this is in the morphogenetic field. This is in the human field that knows the body. And for millennia, the shamans have been able to perceive the field directly, and they've observed that the field basically creates the body. It's not that you're a body that has an energy field. You're an energy field that has a body and that can upgrade the body by selecting to manifest the genes for disease or the genes for health. Now, we know that we can do this through food, that food will begin to flip switches, genetic switches to create health or to create disease. But we can also do this energetically. And many years ago, I know this is a long answer, but many years ago, I was in Haiti, part of a research project where we were studying Voodoo. And Voodoo is one of the great healing arts in the planet, extraordinary healing arts, except that the French were the worst slave drivers in the Americas. The average lifespan of a slave in Haiti, of a Black slave, was 2 years versus 30 years in North America. And I was talking to the Voodoo priest, and I asked him, how do you harm someone? When someone has done something bad, because I know you don't do anything bad, how do you reestablish balance? How do you hurt them? And he said, oh, it's so easy. We take our rattle and we call on their spirit while they're sleeping, and their spirit will be in front of us, will be right before us, and we'll scan their field, and we'll see whether there are any dark elements, dark spots in their field. And when we find that, we'll give it a little bit of energy, we'll tweak it, and it will come open like a bundle of seeds. And what I thought was, well, this is like a computer program that you double click and it takes over your screen. And then the witch doctor says to me, and that person will die of heart disease within a month. So I go, wow, that's very intense. And how do you heal someone? He said to me, he's the same way. And we find that dark bundle of energy and we pull it out of the energy field. And then we bring love and light to where there was darkness before, and that creates health instead of creating disease. So this is how really, truly epigenetics that functions at the level of food. We know that epigenetics, which means greater than your genes, works from meditation. You can create inner peace, and you can modify a bunch of biomarkers, and you can do this through forgiveness, through compassion, but also through upgrading the quality of your energy field, which will then upgrade your body. Will switch on the repair mechanisms in the body that today we understand. We know what they are. We'll switch on autophagy, we'll switch on a bunch of regenerative NRF2 activation, detox pathways get turned on. We begin to produce glutathione as superoxide cellularly, and we can come to an even greater state of health than we had before. And this is what I discovered with the shamans, that they had a wisdom that was 5,000 years old, and that what they had was a system for maintaining health and creating health by preventing disease. So you didn't have to treat it. So you didn't have to treat dementia or heart disease or cancer. You could prevent it. And actually, the communities that I spent time with in the Amazon years ago had no heart disease, no Alzheimer's, and no cancer. And it's only when they started to eat like us and to live like us and to have cell phones that they started to get sick like us and to die like us.
Right. Well, I've always thought about the human energy field as like the operating instructions and kind of like the blueprint for the physical body. And it's got pristine information to a degree. Of course, it has our ancestral imprints and whatnot, but then it can get contaminated by misinformation. And I think that would correlate with these black spots you were referring to that can then translate into disease. And
Totally.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an information field. And if you have viruses in it, like in a computer, you're going to begin coding differently your DNA, and you're going to be creating illness. Yeah.
right. And even misinformation in the form of chemicals in the food or, dyes and additives and things like that. It's not just the trauma and the traumatic experiences
Yeah,
that create
absolutely not.
misinformation.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
you cannot heal trauma if you have a bunch of mercury in your brain, for
that
example,
makes complete sense.
because that's just a neurotoxin, and you need the brain, and you need the vagus nerve and the hippocampus. I remember as a boy, when the thermometer broke, that we would play with the mercury. I don't know if you ever did that, Dr. Beth.
Yeah,
And mercury is a neurotoxin.
it
And
is.
then I went to my dentist, and she started putting mercury in my mouth. So we have such a toxic load that it burdens the body, and it keeps it from processing physical toxins, both from the environment as well as your endogenous toxins, the breakdown of hormones, for example, so that it makes that detoxification process sluggish, but also with emotional toxins. So we're not able to process them because we process them biologically as well. Remember, biology has an invisible component to it. It's one. It's not the mental, the emotional versus the physical. That's still the paradigm that we're buying into. And we need to break out of this paradigm if we want to be able to bring health and healing to our children. If we, women are twice as susceptible to get Alzheimer's as men. So what's happening here? And we don't even have a cure for men or women from the dementias, but we know how to prevent them. We can prevent them. And I wrote a book called Power Up Your Brain with David Perlmutter. I think you know David. He's a brilliant neuroscientist. And we were looking at how basically we have to marshal our energetic resources to create health so that we avoid having to process these toxic energies in our field physically, somatically, in the form of disease. So there's no imprint for cancer, for example. There's no imprint for throat cancer or breast cancer. No, these are stale cheese, dark, stale energies that will gravitate towards the weakest organ or organ system and manifest through there in pathology. In effect, for the shamans in the shamanic traditions, and what I teach my students is that illnesses don't exist. They don't exist. Sick people exist, but illnesses don't exist.
Right, right. And you mentioned that there's no death, that human beings don't have a death program encoded in the DNA. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? So there are about 40 million species in the planet, 40 million different species. And there are only 3 of them that do not have death programmed into our DNA. And these are humans, dolphins, whales, and dolphins. Humans, orcas, originally we thought, and now it turns out that whales and dolphins don't have it either. So the context for this is that we're taking part in an experiment in longevity. Pachamama, Mother Earth, has selected these 3 species to have an experience in longevity. And so, for example, in nature, there are no grandmothers. There are no grandmothers in nature. Menopause does not exist in nature. It's only in these 3 species that we have the grandmother who's the keeper of the wisdom that among the orcas trains the young how to hunt and how to communicate and how to be civil. And so we're taking part in a biology experiment. Now, Mother Nature's experimenting all the time. So, for example, we have breathing is an autonomic function for us. We cannot stop breathing. I mean, voluntarily. Nobody's ever committed suicide by holding their breath. But for dolphins, breathing is not programmed as an autonomic function. They have to choose to take every breath. That's why only half of the dolphin brain sleeps at any one time, so the other half can keep breathing. And if the dolphin isn't happy in captivity, it'll go to the deep end of the pool at the amusement park and settle to the bottom and decide to stop breathing. Nature's experimenting all the time. And I'll give you another example. In the Andes, Mother Nature experimented with giving people big hearts and a lot of hemoglobin, the oxygen transporter, so they could live at altitude. But in the Himalayas, the experiment was not about big hearts. They have the same size hearts as you and I, but about more mitochondria, the energy factories in the body. The experiment in the Andes failed. Nobody lives above 12,000 feet. In the Himalayas, the Sherpas can go to the top of Everest without oxygen. The experiment succeeded. Well, we're taking part in an experiment in longevity. And today we have to do that, what I call the experiment of N is equal to 1. N is the number of people in an experiment, and you want it to have as many people as you can for your experiment to be valid, your study. But in this case, the experiment is about N is equal to 1. My experiment is called Alberto. And if you don't take part in this experiment in exceptional health, because the only way to have longevity is to have health, if you don't take part in the experiment, you get to be in the control group. And the control group is not pretty. It's the statistics. So this is the opportunity that we have today, is to become a new human, a new species of human that will heal differently and live differently and die differently and perhaps never die.
I agree with that. And I think that the same principles of clearing misinformation out of the field that's required for having good health is also required for longevity, because it's really about this seamless translation between the information of the field and our physical form. And I think the misinformation just kind of gets in the way of the flow of the quantum field and the energy in the field into our physical form. I really feel if we can clear this misinformation and kind of adopt a lifestyle where we're accumulating less misinformation.
This is what I wrote about in my most recent book called Grow a New Body. And Grow a New Body is how we actually do that. How do we upgrade the body, the field, the food we eat, the meditation practices, and the communion with the quantum field? I was doing an interview a couple of weeks ago, and the interviewer said, well, what about returning to nature, reconnecting with nature? And I said, we can't do that because we cannot disconnect from nature. We were never separated. We were never kicked out of the Garden of Eden. We're always connected. We're natural beings. We're biological beings that have an invisible field and a visible body. We have a field state that will continue beyond death. And then we have a particle state, that's this one here, that's called Alberto this time around. And this is part of our great healing, is actually knowing that we can embark on that journey to the beyond today without physically dying, so that when we come to the end of our lives, we can do it gracefully and consciously. And the minute you can learn that, tremendous physical healing happens, because we eradicate the fear of death.
Right. And I agree with you that we are inextricably connected with nature, because we are all part of this one grand creation. But bringing consciousness to that connection, I think, also facilitates the flow of information and flow of energy into our field. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, completely. You know, we used to think years ago of food as calories. And today we think of food as information. We know that it's informing our genetics, it's creating health or disease. And we used to think of energy as fuel. And now we know that energy is information. This energy field is an information field. And if you can download version 2.0 of the software, wow, that's extraordinary. You don't have to age. You can be youthing instead of aging.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely. I think we can age backwards biologically. So,
Yep.
yeah, now, one of the things that you have talked about is, and actually some of the people who have worked with you have told me about, is the shamanic fire ceremony for clearing misinformation. That's something that you are intending to share with us today.
Yeah, you know, I'm in a studio, so I have to build a small fire. But it is not about the size of your fire, but about the intention that you bring to it. And this is a ceremony that you can do at home that will help you to change your brain so you can change your mind. So you can step into that higher mind that understands our interconnectedness with each other and with the cosmos and with space, time, and beyond. So but let's focus this ceremony, which I'm going to share with you, and which you need a candle to do and a small stick. But I'd like for us to focus this ceremony in releasing, letting go of those things that have died within us, the belief systems, the habits, the behaviors, the people that we're ready to let go of, that we're ready to shed the way the serpent sheds her skin. So the stick that you put in the fire, and I love these little coffee stirrers because they're wonderful for these ceremonies that I do every day practically, because there's so much changing in the world today. I don't want to be burdened by the baggage of my past and of my trauma because we're all the children and grandchildren of war. So this is a time to shed those old stories so that we can become the co-author of a new story for humanity and for ourselves. This is called the death arrow. And when I learned to do the ceremony in the high Andes, we took big sticks and we blew into the sticks when we were ready to shed. And again, it's an act of love and an act of power that you make. And it doesn't matter the size of the fire or the size of your stick. So I'd like to invite you to blow into this stick, but you've got to blow a feeling, an emotion into it of what it is that you're ready to release and let go of. What are you ready to let go of right now so that you can empty your vessel to receive the gifts of tomorrow, of destiny, of your destiny? Remember that the fire ceremony is humanity's most ancient ceremony because we sat around the fire for 1,000,000 years. We told stories around the fire. We delivered babies. We helped the dead, the dying to set their spirits free around the fire. We made love around the fire. It's almost in our DNA, the fire. And the keeping of the fire was the most important job in the village. And it was around the fire that we told the stories and that we created our first ceremonies. So after you have blown into the stick what it is that you're ready to release and let go of, I'd like you to also blow into it, maybe to the other side or the other end, that which you are summoning and calling to yourself. The qualities, the gifts, not the material things, not the better car or nicer spouse, or no, but the qualities that you would like to summon to yourself, the generosity, the beauty, the medicine, the power to make a difference in the world. And then hold it to the fire. And I'll show you something that you must do very carefully, which is to clear your heart center with the fire. You don't want to set yourself on fire. And then have a glass of water you could release a stick to. Setting free all of the energies and stories that have been wrapped around those themes that you put into the fire. The people, the emotions, the anger, the loneliness, and then what you're summoning. What is it that you're summoning to yourself? And then you pass your hands through the fire, gathering that light, gathering that energy, and bringing it to your heart center that you cleared previously with fire. And this is humanity's most ancient ceremony. And after you do this 10, 20, 100 times, you'll begin to remember times that we have sat together around the fire with the buffalo behind us, lifetimes ago. You'll begin to remember the old stories that we shared around the fire. You'll begin to remember. Because this is one of the great shamanic practices, is that you don't learn by reading books or by listening to your teacher, both of which help, but you learn by remembering. And sometimes you have to go through a dying process of dismembering so that you can begin remembering. And today we're going through that process collectively. We are going through the dismembering of all of the old forms and belief systems that are toxic now, that are falling apart all by themselves. And we are remembering, reassembling, dreaming the world to being newly once again together.
Well, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our shift audience?
Well, I tell my students in our energy medicine trainings that we're dreaming the world into being all the time, unconsciously. And that it's time for us to dream our health and to dream our world into being consciously. So we can dream a world of peace and of beauty and our health for ourselves, for our loved ones, during this critical time in history. And the shamans have a story. They say that before we were born, that we were all together in a great open field, a grassy field. And this very big angel came out and said, you know, it's going to be a very challenging time for the earth. There's going to be war. There's going to be climate change. There's going to be conflict. There's going to be viruses and plagues. And we need healers. We need shamans, agents of transformation, earth keepers. Who wants to come? And we all raised our hands. We all volunteered to be here during this time of the great reimagining of the planet. And this is what we've come here to do, to dream a new world into being together for all living beings, for all creatures, large, great, and small. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Beth.
Well, I know I've come at this time and for a reason, and it's a very exciting time for me. And it's just so beautiful to hear you articulate it like that. And just one final question is just what do you think is the most important takeaway about health and consciousness?
Today, we are taking responsibility for our own health and understanding that we don't have a healthcare system, we have a disease care system, and that it's up to you and I to create health by how we forgive, by how we laugh, by how we love, by how we eat, how we breathe, how we sleep, how we rest, and how we commune with all of creation through the quantum field, through the invisible world that is far more interesting than the visible one. So it's an invitation for you to explore the quantum field. You interact with it through your personal energy field. Very exciting territory to explore and discover. Don't wait, do it today.
And how can people learn more about your work and get in touch with you and maybe participate in some of your educational programs?
Well, my most recent book, Grow a New Body, is the formula for creating a new body and creating extraordinary health. It's available in bookstores and on Amazon. My website, the4winds.com, the4winds.com. And we have online training programs in energy medicine that we do it in multiple languages. So come and join us if you feel called to it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Beth. A pleasure to be with you.